Yeah.
Um, Go ahead, keep going, keep going.
No,
I'm just looking up
is
something.
there a subject? We can.
Um, no, no, no. I mean, you're doing great, man. Uh, Everything you're saying is good. So lead
Right.
it into it. But just like the faithful and discreet slave, that whole topic, just like also like the 144,000. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses are so confused about that. They're saying that they don't know how many more 144,000 are left on the earth. Um, they have no clue. It's like this big mystery. And it's so easy because when you go to Revelation chapter 7, and I always like to bring out the scripture, but if you go to Revelation chapter 7, and this is all the way in Revelation chapter 7, it says it names who are the 144,000. Now, if you've been watching the other two videos on 70 AD, which Barrak and I do a whole special on that,
Hmm.
um, Revelation chapter 7 is a clue all the way back to Genesis chapter 42, verse 32. So it's crazy because it names the 12 tribes, the lost sheep, the ones that were scattered, the ones that came out of Jacob, and it names each one of those 12 tribes. And I'll just go ahead and read the first part. And I heard, this is Revelation chapter 7, verse 4. And I heard a number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed and 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. And then it goes
Okay,
into,
can I stop you right there?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is where I tell you that words are important. What does it say that they were? Does it say they get to come and go? Does it say that they keep being chosen over and over again and replaced?
They were sealed.
Right. So if you seal something, it can't come and go. That means that's an exact number.
That's right.
And they must come from where?
Well, it
They
has to be
almost
physical.
right. So and they almost come from the tribes of Israel, not just anybody. And why are the tribes named specifically? So you can't take something that's specific and then make it vague and irrelevant. Okay.
Right.
There's a significance to that you must be a part of one of these 12 tribes in order to be claimed of the 144,000.
Right.
So, how are these people that technically are Gentiles? You can't take who those that are Israelites physically and then translate them into being a Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
This is about a bloodline.
This is about a
This is
bloodline.
not
Yeah.
about a religion.
Yes.
You know,
It's
technically, Judaism is a religion, it's not a bloodline.
that's right.
Being a Hebrew and an Israelite is a bloodline.
Is a bloodline. Yeah.
So, why is it that the people that call themselves Jews but are not never consider themselves as Hebrews or Israelites?
Right.
They may use the term
Right.
Israeli, back to the terminology.
Right.
They may call themselves Israeli, right? But not Israelites. They may call themselves Jewish, but not Jews. It's there's a difference there, but they never call themselves Hebrews.
Mm-hmm.
Why
That's
not?
right. That's right.
Because
Because they
there are
know they
things
can't
in the
take that
wording.
name.
You've never heard a Jewish person call themselves a Hebrew ever.
That's right.
They'll say that they
Never.
speak Hebrew, right? But that'd be like a Chinese person saying, I'm Chinese, but I'm not Chinese.
Right.
I
Right.
speak it, but I'm not it.
The Yiddish.
Right. And Yiddish is a mixture of some Hebrew words
Mm-hmm.
and
And then
some Germanic words or Germany, which gives you a clue as to where those people really are from,
that's right.
right? They're Khazars, Khazarians, um, Ashkenaz or Ashkenazi. You've heard of the word Nazi, but you have not put the whole sentence together as to Ashkenazi.
Wow.
Nazi is a derivative word of Ashkenazi. It's not doesn't stand on its own.
Right.
So these are clues as to where these people are actually from. Therefore, they
From
don't use, like I said before, Hebrew. They don't call themselves Hebrews. Never will you see them call themselves Hebrews.
right.
Why? because there's something in the bloodline.
That's right. That's right.
You know, and that this is what you must once you understand the bloodlines, right? So back to this scripture that he was reading, these people cannot be Gentiles. Now, who are the Gentiles? The Gentiles are Europeans. Those are the Gentiles. Because all up in the Bible, up until Christ, you never even heard them talk about the Gentiles too
That's
much,
right.
did you?
That's right.
Right?
Because it was the scattering that made that subject come up because of the
Right.
scattering inside the nations.
Right. So you heard Hamites, Jebusites, all of these different nations, none of them were considered Hebrews.
That's right.
So what made this different? What
Yeah.
made the Gentiles different from all these other nations that you had heard from all from the beginning of the Bible all the way up until Yeshua's coming and exiting? You didn't hear about that.
That's
So who are
right.
these Gentiles?
That's
Because the
right.
rest of the Bible took place inside of the continent of Africa.
That's right. And that
All of it.
goes right back to 70 AD. And if you're
Right.
watching this, if you haven't seen part one and part two, stop watching this video. Go to part one, go to part two on 70 AD explain. And then what Barrak is saying is going to make so much more sense to you because even like the Gentiles, for instance, Matthew 10, just check this out. Matthew 10, 5 and 6, it says, these 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep, there it is again, of the house of Israel. So the Bible doesn't contradict itself. So if you think you have one scripture saying go there, and then another scripture saying go not there, then you gotta what's it called? You gotta use your discernment and figure out which Gentiles you're talking about.
Excuse me. So yeah. So to further that point, we're going to go to Romans 11.
Okay.
Okay. And it says, and it's a remnant chosen by grace. It
What
says,
verse?
I'm starting in the first verse.
Okay.
It says, I asked then, did God reject his people? Certainly not. I am an Israelite myself, a descendant of Abraham from the tribe of Benjamin. God did not reject his people, whom he foreknew. Do you not know the scripture says about Elijah, how he appealed to God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars, and I'm the only one left, and they are seeking my life as well. So, if you see
Right.
that, right, many people claim that, well, he took that from the um, Israelites and gave it to the Gentiles, but in the scripture, it actually says he never did take it from the Gentiles. Why? Because his covenant, when he returns his when he brings it back, his covenant is with was with Israel and the Hebrews.
That's right.
It's not with the Gentiles. There's only a grafting in of the Gentiles
That's right.
later. And
Yes.
in the same so now we could drop to verse 11 in the same scripture. That's why I say you have to read whole chapters and verse in order to get a true understanding.
Right.
He says, the ingrafting of the Gentiles. I asked then, did they stumble so as they would fall beyond recovery? Certainly not. However, because of their trespasses, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel what? Jealous.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had God's favor. This takes you back to the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy, where it speaks of the blessings and the curses.
Right.
And this is why this is why I say there is no Old and New Testament.
Right.
It's
No,
all one
it's
continuous
all
story.
one continuous
And what
story.
they
That's
tell
right.
you, the reason why they use Old and New Testament is because they want you to lead you to believe that there was a new covenant unspoken of that was made with the Gentiles.
Right.
And this scripture clearly shows that there was nothing that was made with the Gentiles. It says
Hold
the
that.
only reason why the Gentiles got any of that was to make who jealous? Israel.
Israel. Hold that thought
Mhm.
or continue talking. Give me 1 second. I got to do something out there real quick. 1 second.
Okay. Okay. So, but if their trespasses means riches for the world and their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater the riches will their fulfillment bring? Which means he's going to bring them back. So these are the things that we don't read. Nobody's going to read these to you. You have to read them for yourself so that you can get a true understanding as to what's going on in the world and how it connects to today. That's why I say there's no Old and New Testament. A lot of the things in what they consider the Old Testament are actually prophecy that go beyond when Jesus coming and exiting the earth. There are things that were spoken of that are still yet to take place as far as prophecy is concerned. This is a prophecy. This is telling you what's going to happen, what happened then, and it also is going to tell you what's happening in the future. And it says, I'm speaking to you Gentiles, and as much as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry in hope that I may provoke my own people to jealousy and save some for them. For if their rejection is a reconciliation of the world, what will be their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the part ways, though, is holy, and is the whole batch, is a root, is holy, and there are branches. Now some branches have been broken off, and you, a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among others to share in the nourishment of the olive root. Do not boast or overtake those branches. If you do, remember this: you do not support the root, but the root supports you. So that's a
Mhm.
requirement, is that the natural branches are actually supported by the root. The unnatural branches or the grafted branches are not. So if a Gentile just so happens to come in to the
Right,
understanding, they're not held out by the root. It takes a root to hold the tree in place. It's the basis for the tree. So the Gentiles being able to gain access to this doesn't mean that they've taken over and now they're the tree. They can
right,
only be grafted in and be blessed because why? They will come with the Hebrews out of the condition that they've been in.
right. That
They
goes
could
into
only come with, but they do not become the tree. That's
that's
the
right.
difference. That's why it gave you this illustration.
And that goes back to Isaiah 14, 11, and 12, when it's talking about the cleaving. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. And the strangers, which are those Gentiles, the heathen, shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. So
Right.
that's their hope.
And this is why it takes precept after precept. This is why it takes several scriptures. So if we go back to the 144,000, right? This is why it cannot be something different or other than. You don't get to
Right,
interpret that because you can't find one scripture that supports it any other way than what it's written in Revelation. So we
right.
can go back to let's go back to Revelation where we started
Okay.
this discussion at, and let's go back and read that again. Let's see.
Revelation chapter,
That was 7.
yeah, 7. Um,
And I stopped you when you got to the reading of the tribes.
yeah, and can I share something real quick?
Hmm.
Genesis chapter 42. And that story just keeps going all through the Bible, but right here in Genesis 42:32, we be 12 brethren, sons of our father. One is not, then the youngest is this, stay with our father in the land of Canaan. Now, this is going into in Jacob, their father sent unto them, and it goes into Joseph, Simeon, Benjamin, Reuben. And then if you, that same, those brothers right there are all the way here as the leader of the heads of the tribes in Revelation. So that story always, the names are there and the names are here from Genesis to
Right.
Revelation.
So this is why I say it's not an Old and New Testament. The
Right,
Testament is the same. The Old and the New is to get you to believe that one is irrelevant from the other because it was split somehow with the arrival of Jesus, the birth of Jesus, his ministry, and his ascension. They
That's
get you to
right.
believe that none of this is relevant, but if it's in Genesis and it's in Revelation,
It's
you
relevant.
can't. It's relevant, and almost 90%, 99% of the preachers out there will tell you it's irrelevant, because when there was a new covenant made, but there was no new covenant made. The new
Right.
covenant made is with the house of Israel.
That's
It's
right.
not made with anybody else. Now the Gentiles will benefit from grafting themselves in with the Hebrews, because they're going to be returned from their captivity, right? So when did the captivity take place? It was after the fall of Jerusalem
Right.
in 70 AD. That's
Right.
when the scattering took place. Didn't take place before, because before, remember, the apostles and things, they didn't have to travel very far to get to the Hebrews,
No.
but they traveled to Greece, they traveled to these different places, Rome, but they were only going onto the house of Israel. They
That's
were
right.
not preaching to the Gentiles at that moment. That came later, and the Gentiles grabbed it. Why? It was foretold that that's what would happen, to make who jealous?
Israel.
Israel jealous. That's a jealousy. Why? Because it make it seem like that. And if you don't know any better, you'd be like, "Oh, we lost it." But in what I just read you, you didn't lose it. It was loaned at best.
Mm.